My parents kicked me out at 18 and said, "Be grateful we fed you." So I fed them something they couldn't swallow. On the morning of my 18th birthday, I woke up to my mom pouring cold water over my face. It's time to man up and move out. I sat up instantly and saw my stepdad standing by my stuff in the doorway. They've always been cruel, but I never expected this. "But I'm your son." My mom laughed. "You've been nothing but a burden since your dad died, wasting our money on therapy, crying about nightmares." My stepdad nodded approvingly. "We kept you fed and housed for 18 years. That's more than most would do." Before I could process what was going on, they shoved my bags into my arms and literally pushed me out the door. I didn't even bother fighting. I guess part of me had already given up. After hours of prayer and petting stray cats, I found myself at a homeless shelter downtown. My hands shook as I filled out the intake forms. That's when my phone buzzed. My parents had unblocked me just to twist the knife deeper. "Mom, stop calling family saying you're homeless. You're embarrassing us." Then from my stepdad, "At least your dad had the decency to die in Afghanistan." Facepalm emoji. I lost it. Right there in that plastic chair, I just broke down sobbing. The counselor, this tired-looking woman, touched my shoulder. "Honey, what's wrong?" I showed her the texts. She was reading them when her eyes drifted down to my intake form. Her whole body went rigid. "Wait," her voice came out strange. "Michael Krzyzewski? Your father died in Afghanistan?" "Yeah," I managed. "When I was 6. She gripped the edge of her desk. "Did you ever see the body? Attend a burial?" I stared at her in disbelief. "Excuse me, James, did anyone from the military ever visit after? Check on you?" Not really. No, I don't know. Wait, why are you asking me this?" Her hands click-clacked on her Chromebook. After 30 seconds, her face went white. "James, your father didn't die in Afghanistan." My chest tightened. "What?" "He's at Palmer V, a psychiatric ward. He's been there for 12 years. The fluorescent lights suddenly felt too bright. That's impossible. We had a funeral. I went to grief therapy for years." She looked me straight in the eyes. "You need to see your father. Today, before your parents realize you know." Suddenly, little things were clicking into place. Why Mom got nervous when military families were on TV. Why we moved states right after the funeral. I wanted to break down on the spot, but my stepdad's voice about me being a little betch echoed in my head. So instead, I took a deep breath and asked, "Why today?" Because when, not if, when, your parents find out that you know your dad is alive, then they'll know someone is coming after the benefits they've collected. She drove me to Palmer herself. The whole ride, my brain kept rejecting what was happening. But then we walked through those VA hospital doors, down a long hallway that smelled like floor wax and medicine. There he was, my father. Not the stepdad who beat me, or my mom's other secret boyfriends who tried to win me over with vintage vinyls. My dad, who loved me. "Dad?" The word came out broken. He turned, and his whole face crumpled. "James? They told me I'd never see you again. They told me you hated me. I thought you were dead." I could barely breathe. "I went to your funeral. Mom said you died a hero." His face twisted with so much pain. "They told me you knew the truth and chose them." My brain was in the middle of disassociating when my phone lit up with a notification. While I sat here learning my entire life was built on lies, my parents took the opportunity to drain my college savings, my birthday money, everything. Account closed. I dropped my phone on the floor and my dad picked it up and read the screen. "All my combat pay went to you," he said quietly. "Every month for 12 years. For your future." I never saw a penny. A doctor walked in. "Mr. Krzyzewski has been ready for discharge for years, but he's disabled from the war. He needs family to release him to. Someone who will take care of him." "I'll do it," I said immediately. "I'll take care of him." The next morning felt unreal. Dad walked out in civilian clothes, jeans, and a flannel that hung loose on him. As we got closer to my mom and stepdad's home, his breathing got shallow. 12 years, Dad whispered. 12 years they stole from us. We stood at the front door, the same door they'd pushed me out of yesterday. Inside, footsteps approached. The deadbolt turned. The door swung open. We were met with my stepdad's face. It dropped so quickly I almost laughed. He was seeing a dead man standing on his porch. Behind him, Mom appeared, and her coffee mug slipped from her hand, shattering on the floor. My dad smiled. "Hello, Mark. We need to talk about my death benefits. Listen to 90 seconds and rate me 5 stars on Spotify. Doing a giveaway for people who did this and show proof on my Instagram. There will be 4 winners, and you get to choose between a Spotify or Amazon gift card." Mark's face went through about 5 different expressions in 3 seconds. First shock, then this weird calculation like he was trying to figure out if this was real, then anger that turned his whole face red. Mom made this small choking sound, and her coffee mug just slipped right out of her hand. It hit the hardwood floor and exploded into pieces. Brown coffee splattered across the white tile in the entryway. The sound of it breaking felt perfect somehow, like their lies were shattering right there with the ceramic. Mark found his voice first and started yelling about how we couldn't just show up here. He said we were trespassing and making crazy accusations. His voice got louder with each word. Mom switched tactics so fast it would have been impressive if it wasn't so sick. Her whole face went soft and concerned. She looked at Dad with these fake worried eyes and asked if he was taking his medications. She said maybe he was confused about what really happened. She used this gentle voice like she was talking to a confused child. I felt my hand moving to my pocket before I even decided to do it. I pulled out my phone and opened the camera app. I held it low by my side but angled up so the microphone would catch everything. I kept my face neutral and let them keep talking. Mark noticed after maybe 30 seconds. His eyes locked onto my phone and he lunged forward. His hand reached out to grab it. Dad stepped between us even though his hands were shaking, so bad I could see them trembling from where I stood. Mark stopped. He looked past Dad to the street where a neighbor was getting their mail. His face changed again, and he backed up a step. I kept recording. Mom tried a different approach and said we should all sit down and talk calmly inside. Dad's breathing changed. It got fast and shallow. I could see his chest moving too quick. His eyes had this unfocused look that I recognized from the hospital. He was starting to spiral. I made the choice right there. We came here to let them know we weren't going away. That message got delivered. I touched Dad's arm and said we were leaving. He nodded but didn't say anything. We turned and walked back to the car. I could feel Mom and Mark watching us from the doorway. I got Dad into the passenger seat, and he just stared down at his hands. They were still shaking. I sat in the driver's seat for a minute trying to figure out what to do next. Then I remembered the shelter counselor had given me her direct number. I called her and explained what just happened. She didn't waste time with questions. She said she could arrange a one-night motel voucher through an emergency fund. She gave me the address and said to ask for the manager. I thanked her and hung up. Dad hadn't moved. He was still looking at his hands like they belonged to someone else. I started the car and drove to the motel. It took 20 minutes. Dad didn't speak the whole way. The weight of being the only thing between him and complete breakdown sat on my chest like a rock. The motel was called the Sunset Inn, even though there was no sunset view anywhere, just a parking lot and a highway. The manager gave us the key to room 107 without much conversation. The room smelled like old cigarettes and cleaning spray. There were 2 beds with brown covers, and a desk by the window with a scratched surface. I spread everything out on that desk. Dad's discharge papers from Palmer, my birth certificate that I'd grabbed from my room before they kicked me out, screenshots of the texts from Mom and Mark, the bank notification about my drained account. I lined it all up in rows. It wasn't much, but organizing it made me feel slightly less like I was drowning. I took pictures of everything with my phone. Then I sat on the edge of the bed and called the number on the bank notification. The fraud department put me on hold for 15 minutes. Finally, someone picked up. I explained the situation. The representative said my college savings account was closed yesterday morning. All the funds got transferred to an account I didn't have access to. She said I would need to file a police report. I would also need documentation proving the money was mine. When I asked how to prove that when I'm homeless and barely holding it together, her voice got quieter. She said she understood this was hard, but those were the requirements. She gave me a case number and said to call back once I had the police report. I wrote the number down on the motel notepad. My hand was shaking. Dad spoke for the first time since we left the house. He said when he enlisted, he set up something called an allotment. His combat pay would go directly to support his family. He didn't understand all the technical details of how it worked. He just wanted to make sure we would be taken care of if anything happened to him. His voice had this guilt in it that made my throat tight. He said he thought that money was going to me all these years. For my future. For college. I told him I never saw any of it. He put his face in his hands. Something broke in me watching that. This man who served his country and got locked away and lost 12 years with his son, feeling guilty because he tried to take care of me, and it got stolen. I wanted to say something to make it better, but there weren't any words for this. I just sat next to him on the bed until his breathing evened out. I spent the next hour backing up everything on my phone to the cloud. The shelter counselor told me that documentation was everything when you're fighting people with more resources than you. I created a folder labeled Evidence. I uploaded screenshots of every text message, the voice recording from the porch, photos of every document spread out on the desk. I made sure everything saved in 3 different places: my phone storage, Google Drive, email drafts. I wasn't going to lose this stuff because my phone died or got stolen or Mom and Mark found some way to delete it. Every screenshot felt like a small piece of protection. Every backed up file was something they couldn't take away from me. The next morning, we drove back to Palmer, Virginia. Dad needed a replacement ID with a current address. We also needed printouts of his benefits history. The discharge coordinator was a woman maybe 50 years old with reading glasses on a chain. She was helpful, but moved at the pace of someone who processes paperwork all day, every day. She asked Dad questions and typed his answers with 2 fingers. She printed forms and had him sign them. She said the ID would take 2 weeks to process. The benefits history would be ready this afternoon. I sat in the plastic chair and practiced patience. My brain was screaming that we needed answers faster, that every day was another day Mom and Mark could be hiding money or destroying records, but I kept my mouth shut and waited. The coordinator finished the forms and gave us a number to call this afternoon for the printouts. We thanked her and left. In the car, Dad said he was tired. I drove us back to the motel. He laid down on one of the beds and fell asleep almost immediately. I sat at the desk and stared at the organized documents. We had taken the first steps. We had confronted them. We had started documenting everything. We had begun the process of getting Dad's identity back. It wasn't enough. It wasn't even close to enough. But it was something. And something was more than I had 2 days ago when I woke up to cold water on my face. The next morning, I dug through the papers until I found the VA benefits phone number and dialed it. The automated system made me press numbers for different departments, and I got transferred 3 times before landing in a queue with hold music that sounded like it was recorded in 1987. I put the phone on speaker and set it on the desk while I organized documents. 20 minutes passed, then 40. Dad woke up and shuffled to the bathroom, and I was still listening to the same 30-second loop of elevator music. Finally, a woman's voice came on and asked for Dad's social security number. I read it off the discharge papers. She asked what I needed help with, and I tried to explain about representative payees and power of attorney, but the words came out jumbled. She was patient, though, and started from the beginning. She explained that a representative payee is someone appointed to manage benefits for a person who can't manage them alone. That person has to apply and get approved by the VA. She said someone had been receiving Dad's benefits for years under that arrangement. I asked who, and she said she couldn't tell me that information over the phone without proper authorization. I felt stupid for not understanding all the acronyms she was using. POA and RPP and VARO and things I'd never heard of. I grabbed the motel notepad and started writing everything down, but my handwriting was messy because my hand was shaking. She explained the process for changing a representative payee and said I'd need to file specific forms and Dad would need to be evaluated. The whole conversation took an hour, and when I hung up, my brain felt full of information I barely understood. I called the shelter counselor and told her about the VA call. She said she wanted to connect me with Adult Protective Services because what my parents did might be financial exploitation of a disabled veteran. I hesitated. Mom had spent years teaching me that government agencies were traps that made things worse, and you couldn't trust them. The counselor must have heard something in my silence because she said sometimes the system is the only protection you have. I thought about that. About how the system had already helped me find Dad when I didn't even know to look. About how I couldn't fight Mom and Mark alone with no money and no home. I said okay, and she gave me a number to call and a name to ask for. Giovanni Mercier. She said he handled cases like this, and he was good at his job. I thanked her and wrote down the information. Before I made that call, I tried something else. I went through my phone contacts and found numbers for family members I barely remembered, aunts and uncles and cousins from before we moved states. Most of the numbers were disconnected. 3 went to voicemail, and I left messages explaining what happened and asking if they'd talk to me. 2 rang, but nobody answered. Then I called Aunt Lisa, my mom's sister. She picked up on the 4th ring. I started to explain who I was, and she cut me off. She said she'd already heard from my mother that I was spreading lies and trying to make them look bad. She said she didn't want to get involved in family drama. I tried to tell her about Dad being alive, but she talked over me. She said Mom had been through enough losing her husband and raising me alone, and I should be grateful instead of causing trouble. Then she hung up. I sat there staring at my phone. The isolation felt deliberate, like Mom had spent years cutting off anyone who might question her story or help me if I ever found out the truth. That night after Dad fell asleep, I opened a new document on my phone and started writing everything I could remember. I put Dad's supposed death at the top and marked it as when I was 6. Then I listed everything that happened after. How we moved to a different state within months of the funeral. How Mom got nervous whenever military families appeared on TV shows. How she always changed the subject fast when I asked about Dad's service or wanted to look at photos of him. How she threw out most of his stuff during the move and said it was too painful to keep. How we never visited the grave she claimed he was buried in. I wrote down the therapy sessions where I cried about losing him. The nightmares I had for years. The way Mom used my grief to control me and make me feel guilty for being sad. Writing it all out made the patterns visible. It wasn't just one lie. It was a whole structure of lies built carefully over 12 years, each piece designed to keep me from asking the right questions. My phone lit up at midnight, a text from Mom. It said we could talk if I stopped spreading rumors and making her look bad to the neighbors. She said people were asking questions, and it was embarrassing her. She said I was being dramatic, and we could work this out if I just calmed down and came home. I read it 3 times. My thumb moved toward the reply button, and I caught myself.